My name is Amelia Navarro, and yes, I have an accent. You'll hear it the moment I open my mouth. Round vowels, soft R's, and a rhythm that dances instead of marches. People notice it. Most are polite. Some aren't. But there's one thing I've learned, especially in rooms filled with money: silence has weight. And when you speak carefully, people remember every word. It was a Thursday morning, warm light filtering into my home office, the smell of roasted beans curling from the kitchen. I had my cortado in one hand and my AirPods in, scanning through the usual economic forecasts, startup noise, and niche business podcasts. Just background chatter. Until it wasn't. I wasn't even paying attention to the intro. One of those casually obnoxious bro pods with three guys and one microphone too many. They called themselves The Realist Room. Right. The moment that made me sit up wasn't even loud. One of them said something like, "You ever been pitched by someone who sounds like they're narrating a soap opera?" Cue laughter. And then, "It's hard to take them seriously when it feels like I need subtitles." Another voice jumped in, mimicking an over-the-top Spanish accent, not cartoonish, just exaggerated enough to sting. "I am, how you say, financial expert." They all cracked up. That should have been it. A cheap, stupid moment, but then they dropped a name. Mine. They didn't say it directly, just danced close enough. "This lady pitched us last year, remember?" One of them said. "From Barcelona or Madrid or wherever, talking about generational wealth and value flips." The air in my office went still. My fingers tightened around the ceramic mug. These weren't strangers. These were the same three podcast hosts who took a pitch meeting. I offered their friend, a founder of some crumbling fintech I could have turned inside out for fun. They remembered my voice. Not my ideas, not my numbers. Just my voice. Now here's the thing about me. I don't respond immediately. Not because I'm above it, but because anger for me is a long game. It's not about yelling, it's about positioning. It's about timing. You never crush the ant while it's crawling. You wait until it's right under your heel, then press slowly. I paused the episode, rewound 10 seconds, listened again. The fake accent, the sideways laughter, the name drop. Then I smiled. They had no idea what they'd just done. You see, this podcast, they weren't just blowing off steam to a few followers. They were growing fast. The kind of growth that pulls in sponsors with deep pockets and shallow scrutiny. In fact, I already knew who backed them. Pure Fuel, a high-performance supplement company with a sleek clinical look and a marketing budget fueled by insecure 20-somethings with gym memberships and imposter syndrome. I knew Pure Fuel because I'd already been in touch with their board a week earlier. Not because of the podcast. Because I saw undervalued equity week succession planning and a CEO who was itching to retire but needed the right exit. I already had the dossier. I already had the offer drafted. I just didn't have a reason to expedite. Now I did. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you really like what I have to say here. You should know, I wasn't always like this. I grew up listening, not speaking. My mother used to clean rooms in Monte Carlo while I waited in the hotel lobby with a tattered legal dictionary and dreams I didn't yet have names for. We weren't poor, but we knew where every euro went. I watched how people with power treated the ones who served them, how accents were used to box you in like some sort of tattoo on your tongue. When I was 16, a guest left behind a paperback called The Art of the Deal. I didn't know who the author was, but I read it cover to cover and rolled my eyes the whole way through, then went and read The Intelligent Investor instead. I taught myself what real power looked like. It wasn't loud. It was quiet. It wore nice shoes and didn't need to shout. So no, I didn't rage post on Twitter. I didn't call my PR firm or threaten to sue. I just added a red asterisk next to the podcast name in my notes. Then I picked up my phone, called my assistant, and told her very calmly, move the Pure Fuel acquisition to top priority. We're not waiting till Q3. That's all. No vengeance speech, no drama. Just one slight adjustment to the timeline. Because here's the secret they never teach you in business school. Revenge is best when it looks like just another Tuesday. The first time someone mocked my accent, I was 8 years old. We had just moved to Lyon, and my teacher made me stand in front of the class to read a passage from Le Petit Prince. I was so proud, my voice careful and full of melody, until a boy in the back laughed and mimicked me in a falsetto, slurring the words into something cruel. The teacher chuckled. I learned that day how easily confidence can be shredded by a room full of snickers. The men behind the realist room didn't invent that feeling, they just resurrected it. And this time I wasn't a child. I was a woman with leverage, a legal team, and more capital than they could pronounce. The following week, I made my first official move. Pure Fuel's founder Cole Zimmerman was 52 and already half out the door. He'd built the brand from scratch, started with powdered creatine in Ziploc bags at college gyms, scaled it to a global DTC company, and was now visibly bored. I knew his type. Hungry in the beginning, tired by the end, nostalgic for something simpler, but unwilling to let go until someone made it clean and profitable to do so. I invited him to a private dinner at the Mercer in Soho. Corner table, dim lighting. My kind of setting, intimate enough for candor, formal enough for pressure. Cole showed up late. He wore a sharp blazer with frayed cuff threads and had that slightly inflated look of a man whose net worth outpaced his metabolism. "You've been poking around," he said after the first glass of wine. "Just reading the signals," I replied. "Pure Fuel's ripe." He smiled. "I get offers every month." "I'm not an offer," I said. "I'm an outcome." That made him pause. The silence that followed was textbook. I let it sit, then reached into my bag and slid a thin leather folder across the table. Inside, a term sheet, 3 pages, clear margins, zero fluff. My number was aggressive but fair. The retention clauses were generous for him. The only sticky part was the new compliance audit protocol. But Cole didn't blink. He flipped to the final page and let out a slow breath. "You move fast." "You'll like how this ends," I said. We shook hands before dessert. He'd review it with his legal team, of course, but I already knew how this would go. Pure Fuel would be mine before the next quarter. The press release would be quiet. No need for big noise. I didn't want attention. Not yet. The next day, I went back and listened to the Realist Room again. Not just that episode. All of them. God. These guys were insufferable. 3 hosts, Reed, Mason, and Tyler. Ex-startup bros turned culture commentators, whatever that means. They talked over each other constantly. They bragged about being unfiltered but carefully edited out anything that could actually get them sued. And they worshipped their sponsor like it was holy water. "Pure Fuel, bro," one of them said in episode 64. "It's not just about supplements. It's about a lifestyle. Please." They pronounced L-theanine like it was an anime character. Half their reads sounded like hungover robots. But the checks cleared and the audience lapped it up so no one questioned it. Not even Pure Fuel. Not yet. But I was going to change that. The next month passed in a blur of document revisions calls with M&A counsel and internal negotiations. We worked fast. Pure Fuel had 3 major divisions, and I targeted the marketing arm first. That's where the contracts were, including the one tied to the Realist Room. Clause 4B subsection E. All content produced in partnership must reflect brand values and uphold public neutrality toward cultural, ethnic, and linguistic diversity. Interesting. No one had ever enforced that clause. Until now. My team drafted a memo, friendly in tone, firm in implication. With the upcoming change in executive leadership, it read, "We are conducting a standard audit of all ambassador and sponsorship relationships to ensure alignment with our updated DEI compliance protocols." Translation: If your content makes us look xenophobic, we have grounds to terminate. But I didn't send the memo yet. No, not yet. Because chess isn't about knocking the king over in one move. It's about positioning the pieces until there's nowhere left to run. And so I waited. I kept watching, listening. They were getting cockier. Episode 69, yes. They giggled at the number was particularly charming. Mason joked about a woman with a Bond villain accent who tried to pitch him on an energy drink that smelled like furniture polish. That woman. Me. That drink. A natural adaptogen formula I'd developed for a wellness startup last year. A test pitch. One I had recorded. They had no idea how traceable their carelessness was. It was almost poetic. I forwarded the clip to my general counsel and titled the email, "Begin Filey." Accent Gate. Yes, I name my takedowns like Bond missions. I've earned that. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened a clean notepad, and wrote 4 words. Let them keep talking. Because the beautiful thing about arrogant men with microphones is that they think they're in control until the person they're laughing at owns the airwaves beneath their feet. The irony was so sharp I could taste it. The same sponsor they kept praising, practically drooling over during every ad read, was about to belong to me. And every time they said brought to you by Pure Fuel, they were unknowingly promoting the very woman they'd mocked. It was like watching a cat walk proudly into a trap it built for someone else. But I wasn't celebrating yet. I was waiting on one final sign-off from Cole Zimmerman's board. 3 votes locked in, one still undecided. The oldest director, Milton Kress, wanted a personal reassurance that Pure Fuel wouldn't be gutted post-sale, so I flew to Chicago. Milton lived in a gated lakefront community where retirees wore Patagonia and still referred to fax machines as secure. He greeted me on his porch, offered me a scotch at 2p, and grilled me with every question he thought could rattle a younger woman with an accent. I leaned into it. Let my voice be slow, intentional. Let every syllable echo the exact thing they thought made me small. And when Milton said, "So you're not planning on turning this into another ESG circus, are you?" I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No. I plan on turning it into a billion-dollar company that doesn't rely on influencers who make fun of their own sponsors." He blinked. I didn't. I got his vote the next morning. Deal closed Friday. Officially, it was a quiet acquisition. Just a transfer of controlling interest. No major rebrand. No layoffs. Internally, though, I was shifting everything. The marketing team was the first to feel it. We didn't fire anyone, just replaced the head of partnerships with someone who didn't listen to podcasts at 2x speed and actually read contract clauses. And then I reviewed the list of current sponsor deals. The realest room was at the top. Biggest audience, most exposure, also most off-script incidents. I didn't kill the contract. Not yet. I did something better. I renewed it. 3 more months. But this time I added a clause, one that required quarterly alignment checks and full content delivery, 72 hours before publication. Standard stuff on the surface. But here's the twist. Under Section 7C, I added a creative oversight clause. It gave my team the right to evaluate verbal tone, cultural references, and sponsor-aligned integrity across all unscripted content. In short, we had final say on their mouths. They didn't even blink when they signed. Their manager emailed back a thumbs-up gif. It was delicious. Meanwhile, my assistant Mia started tracking their output like a hawk. Every post, every story, every live. We weren't censoring. We were cataloging, building a library of tone-deaf nonsense, one episode at a time. And I watched it all. One evening, I was in my living room curled up in silk pajamas with a glass of Verdejo watching episode 72 on a flat-screen volume low. The theme that week was what makes a founder legit. They were riffing unscripted, getting sloppy. Tyler said, "I mean, if you can't explain your idea in one sentence, preferably without sounding like Antonio Banderas reading a TED Talk, I'm not investing." The other two burst into laughter. I hit pause. That was it. I didn't even feel angry, just confirmed. They'd had so many chances. All they had to do was shut up, or grow up, or at the very least get slightly better writers. But they didn't. They couldn't. And now they were mine. At the end of the episode, they launched into their Pure Fuel promo. Same as always. Pure Fuel is how we stay sharp, stay ripped, and stay real. I watched Mason wave the bottle around like it was a holy grail. I took a picture of my TV screen and texted it to Mia. Caption: "They really do sell it well. Let's give them one more push." I approved the next payment, because revenge is sweetest when they think they're winning. And oh, they thought they were winning. They were bragging on Twitter about new listenership spikes, patting themselves on the back for raw, authentic content and booking their first live show event. I sent a bottle of champagne to the venue under the name La Accenta, just for fun. Then I set up a weekly internal meeting with my legal team called R&R Review and Revocation. We didn't act yet. We were just preparing, quietly. That's when we found something unexpected. Buried in a YouTube community tab post, one of their fans had asked why they weren't taking on more diverse guests. Tyler replied. We're not here to tick boxes. We're here to talk business, not babysit dialect coaches. Screenshot. Saved. Dated. Cataloged. I added it to the file. That file, by the way. At this point, it had its own name, its own digital folder and a header. The voice they laughed at. I shared it with no one outside my executive circle. Not yet. No press. No public callouts. No threats. Because you don't warn people you're coming for their brand. You show up with the paperwork already signed. And so I waited. Let them grow. Let them spend. Let them dig. Because the hole they were standing in, I wasn't digging it. I was just buying the land around it. 3 weeks after finalizing the acquisition, I attended my first internal marketing strategy sync as Pure Fuel's new executive chair. Technically, I didn't need to be there. My team could handle quarterly budget allocations and new influencer onboarding without me, but I wanted to listen. Hear what the old team sounded like when they weren't posturing for LinkedIn or appeasing clueless 20-something brand reps. We were 12 minutes in when someone brought up the realest room. Highest ROI influencer channel last quarter, said Jeremy, the interim brand lead. They've got loyalty and their demographic is exactly who we target. Conversion on coupon codes is still above industry baseline. Mia, sitting across from me, didn't look up. She just slowly turned her pen in her fingers and waited. And the backlash risk? I asked casually. Jeremy hesitated. Well, they toe the edge. But that's kind of their thing. Raw, real, authentic. Unfiltered, Mia added, smiling sweetly. Like raw sewage. A couple people chuckled. I didn't. Instead, I tapped the table twice and said, let's talk long-term viability. What happens when a raw voice becomes a legal liability? Jeremy adjusted his collar. We've run language filters on transcripts. No hate speech, nothing bannable. They're safe-ish. Safe-ish, I repeated. Is that your strategy now? I didn't wait for an answer. I flipped open the black leather folder in front of me and pulled out a single sheet. A screenshot of their group text thread. Yes, group text. Because what these men didn't realize was that one of their former interns who they forgot to offboard from the shared messaging platform still had quiet access. She sent us their most recent conversation after they posted a tone-deaf meme about CEO baddies with hot accents. Tyler. Bet that Navarro chick's still mad salty about the pitch thing. Read. Her voice haunts my dreams, lol. Mason. We should do an episode on how language barriers kill deals. I laid the printout down on the table and slid it to Jeremy. Silence. Mia folded her arms and said, let me guess, unfiltered again. I leaned back. We're not canceling them, I said. We're spotlighting them for exactly what they are, but not yet. I saw the flicker of confusion in Jeremy's eyes. He still didn't get it. So I explained, we're going to make them our biggest campaign case study. Q4 strategy, dual channel push. Their faces, our name. And while they think they're the stars, I flipped to a second page. A pitch deck for Pure Fuel Voices, a new initiative aimed at elevating underrepresented entrepreneurs in health and performance sectors. We'll be building the future under their nose. The whole room went quiet. Mia smiled. You're going to eclipse them. No, I said. I'm going to absorb them. Because the best kind of revenge doesn't delete people, it repurposes them. After the meeting, I had lunch alone, at a cafe across from Bryant Park. I ordered the house pasta and ate slowly, savoring each bite like it was a chapter in a novel I already knew the ending to. While I was twirling linguine around my fork, my phone buzzed. It was an alert from our media tracker. The Realist Room had just uploaded a new teaser clip on Instagram. The caption, "We've got something to say about fake woke sponsors. Stay tuned." I almost laughed. They were trying to bite the hand that fed them. Again. So I texted Mia, let it run. Do not engage. Because sometimes the loudest mistake someone makes is thinking they still have control. That weekend, I flew to Miami for a conference, private equity legacy funds, all the usual suspects in tailored suits who think charisma is just a louder tone. The opening keynote speaker was late, so I wandered through the sponsor booth sipping bad coffee and mentally rewriting everyone's pitch deck. Then I saw it. A Realist Room fan booth. Merch. QR codes. Cutouts of the three hosts' heads with speech bubbles like, bet. You can't handle the truth. and unfiltered business baby. Charming. I walked right up to the girl at the table, probably 22, enthusiastic, wearing a Stay Real hoodie. Hi, I said. I love your podcast. Who sponsors it? She beamed. Pure Fuel. They've been with the guys since like the beginning. I smiled back. Good to know. I run Pure Fuel now. Her face froze. I handed her my card. Tell them Amelia said hi. Then I walked away. Because some messages don't need to be screamed. They just need to be delivered with perfect timing. I wasn't trying to humiliate them. If anything, I was trying to be generous. I gave them more time than anyone else would have. I kept the deal in place, the money flowing, the mic on. All they had to do was show a sliver of humility, or at least some professional common sense. But they couldn't help themselves. Arrogance is funny like that. It always assumes the joke is about someone else. They were getting bigger, fast. Podcast charts live, shows merch sales. They were becoming the exact kind of mid-tier fame that's just dangerous enough to get sloppy. That's when influencers start thinking they're entrepreneurs and start calling themselves brands. And when that happened, I knew the cracks would start to show. Episode 75 was when they made their biggest mistake yet. They brought on a guest, a wannabe VC bro who wore aviators indoors and said, "Disruption every 4 minutes." At some point during the episode, the topic turned to accents in business. I don't trust anyone who sounds like they're from somewhere else, the guest said, laughing. Like, bro, if I can't understand your elevator pitch without a Babel subscription, I'm out. The hosts laughed. Reed added, "Tell that to that woman from Spain who tried to explain tax shields, and it sounded like she was ordering tapas. They never said my name, but I didn't need them to." The clip hit Instagram Reels within hours. The algorithm did its job. It spread fast. It got reshared to Reddit, stitched on TikTok, and even clipped into a Business Bros Who Shouldn't Have Podcasts thread on X. Suddenly they weren't edgy anymore. They were tone deaf. And that's when I moved. Mia scheduled a meeting with our internal legal team. We'd been preparing for this moment. I brought in 2 people from our brand integrity division and instructed them to begin compliance review, not of the content, but of the behavior behind it. Look for ethical conflict with brand representation, I said. Not PR violations, internal culture violations. In other words, I wanted to build a paper trail that led from public idiocy to contractual breach. And we found plenty. Private DMs leaked. Disrespectful remarks to staff. Receipts of bar tabs charged as client entertainment for nights out that didn't include clients. Nothing illegal, but deeply unprofessional. Deeply off-brand. That was the tipping point. I sent the official notice the following Monday morning. Subject: Compliance realignment and updated sponsorship terms. From Amelia Navarro, Chair, Pure Fuel Holdings. TO, The Realist Room LLC. The email was 3 paragraphs long. Calm, precise. The first paragraph praised the performance metrics of the campaign. The second laid out our commitment to inclusive representation and updated ethics protocols. The third gave them a choice: adapt to our new oversight process, including full pre-approval of all sponsored content or forfeit sponsorship effective immediately. They had 72 hours to respond. They tried to act cool at first. Posted a photo with the caption, "We stay real even when corporate tries to rewrite the script." Clever. But in the background, they were panicking. Tyler's assistant called Mia in a quiet flurry. Mason's manager asked for a clarification meeting. Reed sent me a 1-line email. "Can we talk privately?" "Sure." We set a call. He joined from a car, AirPods in, clearly trying to sound unfazed. "Look, we're not trying to start a thing," he said. "We just do the show how we've always done it. Our fans get the tone. It's not malicious." "Tone is exactly the issue," I said flatly. "And who decides if it's malicious?" "You." He paused. "This feels extreme." "Is this personal?" "Now there's the question." I let it hang in the air. "No," I said. "This is business." Which is exactly what made it hurt more. He backpedaled. Offered to take down a few episodes. Said they'd re-record reads. Asked what it would take to reset the vibe. And right there, I knew I had them. I said I'd think about it. I didn't. Instead, I scheduled a marketing campaign called Real Fuel, Real Voices. We reached out to 5 rising entrepreneurs from immigrant backgrounds. Each one got a 60-second feature ad. Each one got a distribution slot paid for with the exact budget line we'd been allocating to the realist room. Then I made one final move. I had our design team rework the bottle packaging of our best-selling supplement with a limited edition line. The tagline, "Strength speaks every language." We announced it the following Thursday. The post got more engagement than anything we'd done in Q1. Meanwhile, the podcast trio posted a cryptic message about being on hiatus for creative recalibration. No one bought it. Their fans started asking questions. Sponsors went quiet. A few even apologized on their behalf. But me, I just booked a massage, put my phone on silent, and let the emails pile up. Because I didn't need to answer. The damage was done. They weren't canceled. They were irrelevant. There's a difference between destruction and disappearance. Destruction is dramatic. It's messy. Headlines backlash the crowd chanting for blood. People get famous off destruction, even the ones being destroyed. But disappearance, that's quieter. You don't notice it until too late. You reach for the next episode, and there isn't one. You check their socials, and it's just reposted clips from last year. You ask around, and nobody remembers the last time they listened. That's what I wanted for the realist room, and it was working. After our compliance letter, their content slowed. Their tone shifted. You could feel them second-guessing themselves mid-joke, wondering what line they were about to cross. And without their swagger, they were boring. Their fans started to notice. Comments like, "You guys used to keep it real. What happened?" And, "Are they neutered now or just corporate?" began popping up. Their Reddit fanbase, once obsessive, started posting memes about the rise and fall of Realist Room. Mia printed one and pinned it to the office corkboard. By the 3rd week of their hiatus, I got another email from Reed. Subject, "Opportunity to collaborate." I clicked. It was long. Too long. Rambling even. He talked about clarifying values, building bridges, and being misunderstood. At one point, he quoted his own tweet like it was scripture. But at the bottom, he finally got to the point. "We were wondering if you'd consider letting us work with Pure Fuel directly on a rebrand campaign. You know, repair the narrative." I stared at that phrase. Repair the narrative. Cute. I forwarded the email to Mia with just one line. Begin prep on the pivot. Because I wasn't going to rebrand them. I was going to replace them. The timing couldn't have been better. We'd already begun casting for our new series. The Core, a sleek, content-driven platform featuring founders, athletes, and everyday people who broke through barriers, language, gender, geography, to redefine success. Each episode would be 20 minutes. Clean production, hosted by someone smart enough to listen, not just talk. We launched it with a full Pure Fuel integration, ads, product placement, guest supplements, everything. And the first guest, a woman from Medellin who'd built a global logistics platform using secondhand laptops and a team of single moms she trained herself. Her voice, heavy Colombian accent, poised, powerful, not edited one bit. The audience ate it up. Within 2 weeks, The Core had more listens than the Realist Room had in its final month. We didn't steal their audience. We offered their audience something better. Meanwhile, their Spotify ratings dipped below 4 stars. A few sponsors quietly ended agreements. Their manager started cold emailing my assistant about a collab strategy reset. No one answered. One night, I was reviewing campaign data in my penthouse jazz playing softly in the background when I got a notification. Mason had posted a YouTube video titled, "Where We've Been and What's Next." I clicked. Low lighting, hoodie pulled over his head. That faux sincere influencer tone somewhere between apology and victimhood. "We know we've made mistakes," he said. "We've been called out, dragged, and, yeah, some of it's fair. Some of it, we feel isn't, but we've heard you." He paused, rubbed his face. "We've lost sponsors, we've lost steam, but we're gonna take some time and come back stronger." There it was, the soft collapse. They weren't sorry for what they'd said. They were sorry for the consequences. I didn't share the video, didn't comment. I just turned off the screen and let silence return. Because the game was over. But the echo of it, the part where they couldn't figure out how it all fell apart, that would linger. They would replay those choices in their heads for years. They'd remember the fake accent jokes, the contract they didn't read closely, the voice they mocked, without realizing it was the one signing their checks. And I went to sleep that night with my windows open, the sound of the city washing in its languages, its chaos, its beautiful, unstoppable noise, all the accents of power. After the collapse, no one asked questions, not publicly. In the private equity world, we don't throw funerals for failed content creators. We just move the capital elsewhere, quietly, efficiently, like a bloodstream rerouting after a blockage. But in some corners of the internet, threads, forums, group chats, the speculation continued. What happened to the Realist Room? They were blowing up just a few months ago. Did they get canceled or sell out? None of them landed on the real answer. They didn't get canceled. They didn't sell out. They got bought and boxed by someone who smiled while writing the check. And they were still contractually locked into that deal. Oh yes, they thought the partnership ended when the checks stopped coming. But the beauty of smart lawyering is how long the silence can last while the paperwork holds the leash. Our clause was clear. Post-termination brand representation obligations persist for 6 months, including all content published during the final 90 days of sponsorship, which meant they couldn't pivot into another supplement ad. They couldn't even mention a competitor's name. They were stuck, muzzled, contractually irrelevant. Every time they tried to claw their way back with a new promo idea, our compliance team would remind them in sweet, sterile language that their content still fell under review. They were trapped in a ghost brand, and we were already on to the next phase. By now, the core was thriving. Our new voice, Ramia Desai, a multilingual Kenyan-born biotech founder, had just dropped her interview, and people were calling her the podcast host we actually needed. Sponsors were lining up, not because she was loud, not because she was slick, but because she was real in a way that didn't need a catchphrase. That's when the media reached out. Not tabloid media, the real ones. Fast Company, Forbes, a few business podcasts with actual research departments. They'd caught the arc. 3 months ago, the Realist Room on every digital billboard. Now, nothing but shadows. One journalist emailed me directly. Sources say you were quietly involved in their sponsor's acquisition. Any comment on how that shaped their decline? I replied with one sentence. I believe voices deserve to rise or fall on the truth they speak. And I left it there. Because the best revenge doesn't end with fire. It ends with a whisper so well placed, the world leans in to hear it. Later that week, I walked through Pure Fuel's NYC office and noticed something that stopped me. The intern board. It was just a small cork strip in the hallway, photos of every new intern class. And there, in the latest cohort, was a young woman named Louisa. She had warm eyes and a nervous smile. Underneath her name was a line she'd written herself. My voice is my power. I stood there for a long moment. Then I walked to my office, opened my desk drawer, and pulled out the last printed version of The Voice. They laughed at the dossier I'd built page by patient page. I fed it into the shredder because I didn't need it anymore. This wasn't about them now. This was about the ones watching, the ones listening, the ones who'd been told their voice was too foreign, too feminine, too soft, too strange. They were going to remember what happened here, not just the fall of 3 men with mics, but the rise of something better in their place. And me. I had other deals to close, other rooms to quietly step into, other stories to rewrite before anyone even knew I was holding the pen. The final nail came with no fanfare, no viral clip, no dramatic post. Just a quiet email sent at 10:42 a.m. on a Wednesday. Subject: Formal notice of sponsorship conclusion. From Emilia Navarro. To The Realist Room LLC. 3 paragraphs. No venom, no digs. Just language polished smooth by a legal team that knows the power of punctuation. It stated that the partnership had concluded, that all obligations under Section 7 had been fulfilled, that the brand no longer required association usage rights or promotion from the Realist Room or its affiliated entities. Effective immediately, their mic was theirs again. But here's the thing about freedom. It feels less powerful when there's no one left to listen. That afternoon, I sat in my favorite reading chair, legs tucked up, a wool throw over my knees. Rain ticked softly against the windows, and New York was muffled beneath it. I wasn't gloating. I was breathing. There's a strange kind of peace that comes with seeing something through, especially something personal, something that once hurt. You reach a moment where it's no longer about them, it's about closure. That crisp, clean snap of a story ending where you decided it would. My phone buzzed. A message from Mia. They unfollowed Pure Fuel. All three of them. I smiled. Small things but telling. They knew. They might never say it out loud, not even to each other, but they'd felt the pressure. They'd tasted what it meant to be powerless under someone they underestimated. Someone they once laughed at. Someone whose voice they thought was decoration, not direction. Meanwhile, Pure Fuel was thriving. Our sales were up 22% from last quarter. Our audience was broader, smarter, more global than ever. We'd launched the core in Spanish and Tagalog. We were hiring hosts in Nairobi and Montreal. Accents weren't barriers anymore. They were assets. And the data agreed. Our most watched episode that month. A young Brazilian entrepreneur talking about sustainable agriculture with subtitles, no overdub, just her voice. Her words. Raw, real, unfiltered. See how that works? Later that week, I had a meeting with a private equity prospect. New wellness brand. Scrappy. Ambitious? The founder was nervous young guy, probably early 30s, trying to hide it with bravado. He slid into his pitch and stumbled a bit, his Ukrainian accent thick around the vowels. He stopped. Apologized. I'm still working on sounding more marketable. I leaned forward. Don't. He blinked. I smiled. Speak how you think. If they don't understand, that's their problem. He sat up straighter after that. Finished the pitch. And it was good. Not perfect, but good. Raw. Honest. I gave him a term sheet the next day. Because sometimes the best investment is not in the product, but in the person finally allowed to speak without fear. That night, I poured myself a drink. Negroni stirred slow and walked out onto the balcony. The city below was buzzing with languages. Horns, music, a street performer singing in French. Somewhere someone was laughing in Mandarin. Farther off, Portuguese. All of it blending into one unstoppable, undeniable melody. Not noise. Power. I raised my glass not in victory, but in stillness. I was never trying to be louder than them. I was just proving quietly, permanently, that I didn't have to be. 3 months passed. Not a word from them. No new episodes. No comeback tour. No Instagram live sub-stories. Just silence. Reed went private on all his socials. Tyler started resharing wellness memes from some coach in Arizona. Mason tried to launch a side project, Realer Than Real, but it flopped after 2 episodes and a single 1-star review titled, "Still Not Listening." I didn't do anything to stop them. I didn't have to. Their audience had moved on. The people who once clung to their every smug punchline now followed voices that didn't need to shout to be heard. It was exactly the future I'd planned for. But there was one last thread I hadn't pulled. A tiny, irrelevant detail to anyone else but not to me. It started with a podcast award. Every year, one of the big media companies hosted a ceremony for independent excellence in audio. It wasn't the Grammys, but it had clout, credibility, and a category for Best Business and Entrepreneurship Show. The Realist Room had submitted the previous year and lost to a Canadian podcast about ethical investing. They'd mocked the winner relentlessly on their show, those maple syrup hippies, I believe Mason called them. But this year, I entered the core. Under my name, we submitted 3 episodes, 1 in English, 1 in Hindi, 1 in Spanish, all hosted by immigrant entrepreneurs, all raw, authentic, unpolished, no flashy sound design, just clean truth. 3 weeks later, we got the nomination, and then we won. I didn't attend the ceremony. I had no need for trophies. But Mia went in my place and sent me a photo. The little black and gold award sitting on the podium lights, catching the engraved name. The Core, executive producer, Emilia Navarro. Later that night, she forwarded me a tweet from Tyler's burner account. Yes, we knew it was him. Same posting style, same weird obsession with protein pancakes. The tweet read, Funny how you can buy credibility these days. Just add subtitles and a sad story. And that was the moment I knew. They still didn't get it. They thought I bought success. But I didn't. I built it out of every crack they mocked, every accent they sneered at, every voice they tried to mute with laughter. They handed me the blueprint when they made me the punchline. All I did was follow it to the bank. But here's what really sealed the arc. A year to the day after I first heard that joke in their episode, I gave a talk at Columbia Business School. Guest lecture. Nothing flashy. Just a small room of students in varying states of caffeine dependency and panic about their summer internships. I spoke for 30 minutes on long-game investment strategy. But near the end, one student, a woman with a lilting French-African accent, raised her hand and asked, "How do you handle being underestimated?" The room got quiet. I looked at her for a long beat. Then I said, "You let them." A few chuckles. A few curious stares. I smiled. You let them think you're small. Let them think your voice is weak. Then you walk in and sign the contract they didn't read closely. And by the time they realize who you are, it's done. The girl smiled back. She got it. The lecture ended. A few students came up to ask for mentorship. One handed me a card written in careful script. The last line read, "Thank you for making silence feel powerful." That one I kept. Tucked it into the same drawer where I once kept the dossier called "The Voice They Laughed At." Because now, I didn't need a file. I had a legacy. Legacy is a funny thing. It doesn't arrive with a parade. There's no drumroll, no plaque, no exact moment where you say now. I've made it. It builds quietly, layer by layer, like sediment. You only notice it in hindsight when you look back and see the ground you're standing on used to be quicksand. That's how I felt a few months later at a rooftop dinner in Barcelona. It was a warm evening, the kind where conversation melts easily into laughter and the wine glass always refills itself. The table was filled with founders, investors, and a few journalists who were more interested in stories than scoops. I was there because the core had been invited to a global podcast summit. Not to speak, just to be seen. That's more powerful sometimes. One of the newer hosts leaned toward me between courses. He was young, sweet, full of adrenaline. His podcast focused on immigrant entrepreneurs in Europe. I just want to say, he said, "I heard what happened with the Realist Room. That was legendary." I gave him a polite smile. "What do you mean?" "You bought their sponsor, right?" he whispered. "Took them off the map." "I don't take people off the map," I said. "I just draw better ones." He laughed, but I was serious. Because by then, I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about what came after. The core was expanding. We'd just inked distribution deals in South America and Southeast Asia. We weren't just producing content, we were producing careers. Hosts who once feared their voices weren't marketable were now getting brand deals, TEDx invitations, even policy attention. And Pure Fuel. It was no longer just a product. It was a platform. We'd launched a new initiative, Fuel Forward, a micro-grant program for first-time founders whose ideas were too early stage for VC but too smart to ignore. Each recipient recorded a short story about where they came from, what drove them. These stories were uploaded to the Fuel Forward page with one condition: no editing their voice to sound more neutral. The result: raw, diverse, beautiful soundscapes of ambition. One woman from Morocco recorded her story entirely in Darija Arabic. Another man from Laos whispered his story in English nervously over 4 takes, and we kept all 4 woven into a single layered track. That project did more for our brand than a million polished ad reads ever could. Meanwhile, I still got occasional pings from the past. An old VC I used to pitch back in the early days sent me a message. "Navarro never thought you'd be running media now. Well played." I didn't reply, because he was part of the crowd that once told me to neutralize my tone. "You'd be more effective if you didn't sound so dramatic," he'd once said. I think he meant musical. One night, I found myself in my office late, too late, scrolling through an old Google Drive folder labeled Original Pitch Decks, 2016. I opened one. Slide 1. Our voices are not liabilities. They're signatures. I'd written that line almost 10 years ago. Nobody cared back then. But now, it was everywhere. On our press kits. On our packaging. even engraved on the glass wall of our podcast studio in Tribeca. That's legacy, not the people who doubted you, not the ones who mocked you, not even the ones you proved wrong. Legacy is what grows from the place where the insult hit and didn't kill you. It's the strength that forms behind your teeth when you speak, knowing every word carries weight. And the voice they laughed at, it's the one echoing in boardrooms, on stages, in headphones worldwide. Not because it got louder, but because it never stopped. By year's end, I had almost forgotten their names. Not out of malice, just evolution. When you build something real, something lasting, the background noise fades, even the noise that once made your blood boil. I was in Singapore when the final ghost of the realist room drifted back into my orbit. I'd flown in for a roundtable on ethical AI and global brand responsibility. Half the speakers were CEOs, the other half academics. No one had time for old grudges. During a break, a woman from Jakarta leaned over and said, "You're Amelia Navarro, right?" The voice behind the core. I nodded. "My niece listens to your show while she walks to school," she said. "She says it makes her feel like she belongs in the business world." That's when I felt it again, that slow settling warmth, the kind of pride that doesn't rise in applause but in quiet, unshakable impact. After the event, I checked my email out of habit. In the sea of scheduling requests and investment updates, there it was. From Mason Whitlock. Subject: New agenda, just closure. I sat with it for a minute. Then I opened it. Emilia, I know I don't have the right to your time, and I'm not writing to fix anything. Just saying I see it now, what we sounded like, what we lost, and what you built. I used to think volume was value, but you proved the opposite. No reply needed. Just wanted to say, I'm listening now. Mason. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then closed the laptop without replying. That was the reply. That he was listening. That was enough. The next day, I visited our Singapore studio. Small but perfect. White acoustic walls, deep wood desk, clean light. One of our new hosts, a Burmese woman named Nandar, was in the booth. She was nervous, first time recording in English. She kept apologizing between takes. I stepped in, smiled, and said, "Don't fix it." She blinked. "Fix what?" "Your voice," I said. "That's the sound we're here for." She smiled, took a breath, began again, slower, stronger. Outside the booth, Mia passed me a new pitch deck from a social startup out of Romania, voice-powered learning software, targeting immigrant families. I skimmed the first slide. "The accent you hear is your future customer." I grinned. We'd fund it. Of course we would. Because the voices that were once mocked, they were building the next wave. And me, I was done chasing revenge. That part was over. Neatly folded, filed away. Not erased, but absorbed. Like all good lessons. Now I was just listening to all the voices rising around the world, carrying stories no one had let them tell before. And knowing that in some small way I'd helped clear the static, so they could finally be heard. By the time I stepped off the plane in Los Angeles, the core had become something larger than a podcast. It was a movement. It wasn't just about stories anymore. It was about ownership, distribution, influence. The platform had grown into a production house, a syndication partner, and recently a quiet venture fund for audio-first creators. We didn't need to say we were big. The numbers did that for us. And L.A. noticed. The New Voices, New Rules Summit had invited me to close out the weekend half keynote, half Q&A. Nothing overly flashy, but people showed up. Producers, agents, brand executives, students with recorders, and a surprising number of ex-founders who were now story consultants. I wore navy, no jewelry, just a headset mic and a very still posture. The lights were warm and the room was full. I opened with this. Some of you have been told your voice is a liability, that it's too thick, too soft, too foreign, too emotional. I'm here to tell you, they were wrong. There was a pause, then something I hadn't expected: applause. Real grounded applause, the kind that doesn't erupt like a stadium cheer but swells like water. I told them about Pure Fuel, the acquisition, the strategy, the silence. Not the names, but the shape of it. I let them fill in the blanks because anyone who's ever been underestimated already knows the plot. And at the end, someone from the back row stood up. A young man, early 20s, Hispanic accent softened by American vowels. He said, "How do you know when it's time to speak up versus time to move in silence?" The question hung there perfectly still. I smiled. "You speak up after you've moved. And not before." Laughter. Nods. A few people wrote that down. That night, I walked through Venice Beach alone. Just me, salt air, and the sound of skateboard wheels slicing the pavement. A street saxophonist played something slow and warbling nearby. Every few feet, I heard a different voice: Tagalog, Farsi, Mandarin, Nigerian English. A symphony of everything I was once told to flatten. I passed a pop-up cafe with a QR code on the window. Under it, a chalkboard read, "Our barista today speaks 5 languages. Please be patient while they choose the most beautiful one to serve you in." I stopped, took a photo, texted it to Mia with 3 words: "New brand copy." And suddenly I was smiling. Not because I'd won, not because the old voices had faded, but because the future had already arrived and it didn't sound anything like the past. There was a moment, a quiet one that I didn't expect to mean so much. It happened on a Tuesday morning back in New York. Rainy. Gray. The kind of day that turns every taxi windshield into a watercolor and every street corner into a puddle of reflection. I was walking into the Pure Fuel building for a quarterly board check-in. Nothing dramatic on the agenda, just growth reports, expansion proposals, and a sneak peek at a new product line we'd developed with a wellness startup out of Vietnam. As I crossed the marble lobby, the receptionist looked up and smiled. "There's someone waiting for you in the lounge," she said. "Didn't have an appointment but said you might want to see him." I frowned, curious. I walked toward the glass-walled lounge and froze in the doorway. It was Reed. 1/3 of the realist room. He looked older, or maybe just smaller. No mic, no hoodie, no audience. Just a man with tired eyes and a messenger bag clutched like a life raft. He stood as I entered. "Amelia," he said. I didn't respond. Just motioned for him to sit. "I won't take much of your time," he began, voice low. I've been thinking about all of it, about what we sounded like, what we built, what we broke." I waited. "I used to think we were fearless," he continued. "But looking back, I think we were just loud and scared. Scared that if we didn't keep talking, we'd disappear." He glanced at me. "You didn't just take something from us," he said. "You showed something. That we never had control, just noise. And when the noise stopped, we had nothing left to say." I let the silence sit, let him feel it. Then I said, "So why are you here?" He hesitated. "To say thank you." I blinked. Not for what happened, but for what I learned after. He reached into his bag and pulled out a paperback manuscript. Rough draft. Spiral bound. On the cover, notes from the echo chamber. "It's not a comeback," he said quickly. "Just a reflection. I'm not here to pitch. Just thought maybe you'd understand." I took the manuscript not to read but to acknowledge. Reed stood. Before he left, he said, "You were right. About everything. Especially about letting people underestimate you." He offered a hand. I took it briefly. It was enough. He left without asking for anything more. I carried the manuscript to my office, set it on a shelf behind my desk, right between a copy of my first pitch deck and the award The Core had won. Not because I planned to read it, but because that story, his silence, his arrival, his acknowledgement was now part of mine. Later that afternoon, I met with Mia to discuss the new campaign launch. She had mock-ups for our next series. Voices from refugee entrepreneurs. One tagline read, "Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it just waits its turn." I nodded. "That one." She smiled. "Knew you'd say that." I glanced toward the window. The rain had stopped. The city was steaming alive again. I thought about how long it had taken to get here. How many rooms I'd sat in pretending my voice didn't shake. How many deals I'd made with a smile tight enough to crack. How many people heard my accent and decided they already knew my worth. And how every one of them, every single one, helped sharpen the blade I now held in silence. They thought it was about vengeance. It never was. It was about visibility. And now, we were seen, all of us. The final transformation wasn't explosive, it was subtle, and all the more powerful for it. It came in waves. A panel invitation here, a podcast feature there, articles that mentioned my name with words like trailblazer strategist or my personal favorite, quietly dominant. We'd reached the phase where the story no longer needed to be told because it was being taught. Business schools had started using our case as a module, a lesson in reputation management, branding, and influence. They titled it The Accent Clause. I didn't write it. Someone else distilled it from headlines and legal filings and Reddit sleuths with too much time. I read it once. They got most of it right. They missed the smell of the cortado that morning, the flicker of shame that had almost turned to fire, the absolute precision it took to wait just long enough for the perfect strike. But they understood the arc, and they understood the why. It wasn't about them. It never really was. It was about what happens when you stop apologizing for the way you speak and start making others listen harder. In February, we launched our boldest project yet, Voxtide, a global audio network with local hosts in 30 cities. Every voice authentic, every accent untouched. We didn't dub, we didn't flatten. We trusted listeners to meet the speaker halfway. Investors were skeptical, until the numbers came in. Our first series, Homesick Hustles, told stories of immigrant founders who ran businesses out of basements, taxis, kitchens, and corner stores. We had to translate the episode titles, but the voices, we left those exactly as they were, raw, cracked, brilliant. The platform exploded. Brands wanted in, not to sponsor, to learn. Their internal training teams asked to license episodes for cultural competency programs. HR departments reached out for workshops. Universities sent requests to partner. Suddenly, the thing I was once told to fix had become a standard. A sound standard. Meanwhile, the Realist Room remained dormant. Their domain expired quietly. Someone offered to sell it on Twitter for $300. No one bit. Reed, to his credit, stayed quiet after his visit. Mason tried again on another platform, but without the bravado, it didn't stick. Tyler vanished. Last I heard, he was consulting for a crypto startup that couldn't spell compliance. And I was planning our expansion into audio drama. Yes, fiction. Voiced entirely by non-native English speakers. Not because we had to, but because we chose to. Because somewhere out there, someone is sitting in a kitchen headphones and hearing a voice that sounds like theirs, not polished, not processed, but powerful. And maybe for the first time, they'll think, maybe I don't need to change anything at all. Maybe that's where it starts. With a voice. Not louder, just heard. It's strange how revenge disappears once it's complete. You think it'll stick with you, that you'll walk around with the taste of it forever, like the afterburn of too much wasabi. But in truth, it fades, because the goal was never really vengeance. It was restoration. And now, standing in the glass atrium of our new headquarters in Lisbon, watching a group of young interns tour the space, laughing, chatting in a fusion of languages, I felt none of the heat that once pushed me forward, just clarity. This was the final chapter. We'd opened the Lisbon office for symbolic reasons. Portugal was my grandmother's birthplace. She never left the country, but her voice, low, honeyed, fiercely kind, taught me how much power one tongue could carry. On opening day, we installed a plaque by the entrance. It wasn't branded. No logos. Just one quote etched in brushed steel. May the voice you once hid become the one that leads. That morning, as light poured through the windows, I stood beside it. Quiet. Steady. Whole. Mia walked up beside me, tablet in hand. Press is asking if you'll comment on the core hitting 50 million downloads. I shook my head. Let the work speak. She smiled. I thought you'd say that. We stepped into the elevator. On the way up, she asked, do you ever think about them anymore? I didn't need to ask who them was. I turned to her. No, because I truly didn't. Their voices were echoes now. Footnotes. They weren't even villains in my story anymore. Just plot devices that propelled the real tale forward. And the real tale, it wasn't about mockery. It wasn't about acquisition. It was about liberation, not just of my voice, but of thousands, millions. People who now spoke boldly because someone told them years ago, you don't need to fix that, and believed it. Voxtide was preparing for its next leap, a mentorship incubator for marginalized audio creators. Our mission, not just to distribute voices, But to launch them, I would no longer be the main voice. That was the point. My job now was to amplify to finance, to open doors so wide they couldn't be shut again. Later that week, I stood at the back of a recording studio. A young man from Poland was laying down his first podcast. He stumbled, stopped, laughed. "I sound weird?" he said. And the engineer, a woman from Nigeria trained in our first cohort, smiled and said, "You sound right." That was it. The end of the arc. Not with applause. Not with a mic drop. But with one voice being heard without having to change a thing. That's all I ever wanted. And I'd built a world where that was no longer remarkable. Just normal. Take a breath. Let the story settle. What began as a small, cruel joke about an accent became the spark that lit a quiet empire. One not built on outrage, but on precision. One not powered by fury, but by clarity. This wasn't a tale of public humiliation. It was a lesson in long memory and even longer strategy. You followed Amelia Navarro not because she shouted louder, but because she never needed to. Her victory was not in silencing others, but in amplifying what had been buried for too long. The strength in every voice once told to shrink. In her silence, there was design. In her patience, power. And in the end, the very people who once mocked her learned the cost of mistaking softness for weakness. But beyond revenge, there was rebirth, a network, a movement, a platform for stories told without apology, for language not corrected but celebrated, for futures shaped by the ones who were never supposed to hold the pen. So tonight, as your breathing slows and your room dims around you, remember this. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You just need to keep speaking, especially when they hope you won't. Let them underestimate you. Let them laugh. Then build the future right under their nose. And when they finally turn around to look for you, you'll be gone. Far ahead, already writing the next chapter, already amplifying the next voice, already building something that no one can take away. Good night.